why don't we go ahead and kick off and let you run the slides there, and I'll do some of the MCN. So, welcome again today. You've already met us, but just as a formal introduction, I am Tom Evans with Productside. I've been with Productside for almost 15 years. And being our main actor and character today, leading this webinar, is Dean Peters. Dean?
Hey everyone. I am Dean Peters, also a principal consultant and trainer here at Productside. I will have been here 3 years in about 30 days. So about a month away from being here for 3 years. Before that, I think I had about 20 years in product management. And before that, 10 years in engineering. You can read the rest of the lies about us in LinkedIn.
All right, excellent. Well, let's go on to the next slide. Let us tell you a little bit about Productside if you don't already know who we are, or you're not so familiar. But at Productside, we know how hard it is to deliver products people not only use, but truly love. Whether it's aligning stakeholders, predicting customer needs, or managing endless backlogs, we've seen it all. And that's why we're here to help you become more outcome driven in achieving the results that you want to achieve. What makes us different? Well, we don't come in just to give you training. We want to help you with a complete solution that is going to help you achieve transformation. We are willing to tailor what we do to your context. Now, while we know many of the product management principles are common across industries, we know each company has some unique things and needs around it. And so we're willing to customize and tailor what we do to meet your specific needs. And of course, as you see already with Dean and I, we've been around for a while. We're invested in this work. We love products, we love product management, and we want to help you do better. So we're thrilled to have you here. Let's do just a couple more slides, and then we're going to get into the main content. First, we want to keep this interactive, and Dean said that earlier. We love to have conversations going on. But before I get into that, we always have the question, can I watch the recording later? And the answer is absolutely yes. We'll be sending out a link to the recording after the webinar ends. Now, we do want to hear from you. And one of the best way to ask questions is the Q&A feature. And so if you look at the Q&A feature in your Zoom interface, you will be able to go and enter questions there. And I'll be monitoring that and tracking those questions. Don't wait till we're done. If the question comes up, ask that question when you have it. And I'll find the appropriate time to interrupt Dean, or even an inappropriate time to interrupt Dean, and ask the question. And of course, if you want to keep the conversation going between you, you can do that within the chat window. So we encourage you to keep that active and going. And then finally, we want to invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn page is more than just a place to follow us. It's a community. When you join us, you'll get access to leadership best practices that can inspire your own growth, conversations about the critical role of product management and tips on making it more impactful, and opportunities to network with other professionals who share your challenges and goals. So all you need to do is to scan that QR code on the screen, or look for us under Productside. So see the URL for Productside. We'd love to hear from you and have you engaging in our conversation. And with that, why don't we go on into today's content, Dean?
All righty. And let me ask the question, what's so unsafe about large enterprise frameworks? They promised us coordination. They were supposed to deliver us from chaos with choreography. I think they were, here to help organize things and get things done. But what have we seen? Instead, we've seen more chaos than choreography. We see things like happening in our world, like AI moving Tesla into ludicrous mode, and meanwhile, SAFe is still using a paper map that you fold. We have the question always running, are we really being agile, when the question should be, can we adapt to the speed of change? So we're going to talk about large scale frameworks, including Scaled Agile Framework, but other large frameworks and bureaucratic beasts that get in our way of delivering value here. So, well, as soon as I click my mouse the right way. So First, what we want to talk about is being unsafe at any speed. And as we welcome you to this joyride through the crash site of modern agility. I want to, think about what is it about safe that brought us here to this webinar? What is it about these large frameworks that have, makes us feel like, yeah, we're doing it, but it doesn't make me any safer here. Um, it's been out for all these frameworks have been out for a while, and are we really getting anything done? And I've got some in real world, in real life, excuse me, examples, all right, of companies that didn't do so good as they use product frameworks like Safe. So, for example, Nokia, they were running Safe, and they found themselves paralyzed by it. In fact, when the iPhone came out, a lot of their process is what got in the way. And, at the now Nokia is nothing but a memory and, a few phones in someone's, what do you call it, junk drawer there. There was a company in the Netherlands called Waternet who tried to scale using Safe, and they ended up just scaling their status reports. And that's not trying to be snarky. That's an actual quote by one of their what do you call it? The CEO. He actually has many, many bad things that talks about how a large framework was unsafe for them. And then we have Pôle Employee, which is now, France Travail, which an employment agency in France. And during COVID, they could not move at the speed of transmission because their PI planning was moving at the a quarterly at a quarterly pace. So these are just some examples of where large scale frameworks were unsafe and left more roadkill than active roadmaps here. And it's not just safe. We want to talk about some other big bureaucratic busts. Uh, Tower Records, for those in the States, they were doing great up until the internet. And with the internet, they saw the digital wave and they decided to do some working groups around it and do a lot of surveys. By the time they decided to get into the game of e commerce, it was already too late and the company went bankrupt. GM nearly lost their shirt. They actually had to apply for a bailout, and their Byzantine processes, like, for example, taking 10 years to get around to a faulty ignition switch, which cost them billions of dollars, or same thing with a faulty transmission. And I think there's rumor it took them 1 year to decide on cup holders, unsubstantiated. And then you have the example of Kodak, who invented the digital future of cameras, but they couldn't, the process and the bureaucracy couldn't get the products launched in time to save the company. So, with that, Tom, I wonder if you've got any stories about big processes or bloated bureaucracies that perhaps got in your way.
Yeah. So a lot of this, as I worked in a lot of smaller companies, and so we tended to not to have too much bureaucracy in what we were doing. But as I've been consulting over the past 14 and almost 15 years, I've run into a number of organizations where bureaucracy really slowed them down. And what I found is most of these that I worked where I saw this were where within telco, financial services, and insurance type companies.
Yep.
And part of their challenge was is that anytime you made a change to a telco product or a financial service or a health insurance type product, it touched dozens of systems underneath. And so it was their architecture that got in the way. And of course, there was probably a lot of bureaucratic risk management that was also going on within that. And so, Dean, what I want to share with you is that I was with one client and they were running in this situation. They said, we want to do agile, we want to be agile, but we have no way of getting, the only way we can even come close is with safe. And
Yep.
so I think, part of my question that I want you to address as we go through this is some companies, by no fault of anything else other than their architecture, safe is the only way for them to even try to scale. And so, yes, I don't think any of us love safe, but yet I think some companies have found that to be the only fallback position they could get
Yeah.
into.
So I want to get to your question there, and I want to get to it quickly here. But let me, whoops, still want to do that. There we go. But I first want to talk about some organizations in some of the industries you mentioned, healthcare, finance, and some companies. So, for example, Capital One brought Safe in for exactly the reasons you talked about, Tom. But late 2023, they started the wave of all the layoffs in the agile world. They basically called it agile theater. I mean, that came straight from their CTO, where so they just got rid of all of it, and have found they're able to work now. To their Some will argue that okay, but they already had all the training, so they still kept a lot of those muscles here. They're just not practicing safe as it was prescribed. But then you have companies with like healthcare records, like Epic, arguably the largest healthcare, what they call it, record provider in the U.S. And they found that Safe slowed down their implementation of AI tools, especially in the area of clinical trials. And then Deutsche Bank, they couldn't keep up with. And here's the thing: a lot of organizations are have to what do you call it are bound by heavy compliance demands, and
Hmm.
what they found was they couldn't keep up with the compliance demands because safe was slowing them down. So the very thing they brought in to help them with compliance was the very thing that they felt was getting in the wrong. So the solution was worse than than the cause. So I think a lot of that has to do with the problem that we're facing here, and I've got the problem here. Basically, the problem we're talking about is we're product managers in large enterprises. We're trying to deliver value at the speed of change, but our large bureaucratic processes slow us down. And a lot of it is because their control is prioritized over autonomy. And of course, it frustrates us, as many probably hear, and because as we see here on this diagram on the right, Martek's law, technology does not slow down. In fact, it's the pace of change is exponential, whereas the change of our organizations is more logarithmic. And what that means is we're starting to see bigger and bigger and bigger gaps each day. So unless we can figure out how to bridge this gap, then we're going to be in like a lot of these companies like Epic, like Capital One, like Deutsche Bank, who are starting to think twice about these large frameworks here. So before we move on, I want to hear what the good folks here in our audience have to say. And we've got a poll. I want to hear about which framework fail frustrates you the most. Which framework fail frustrates you the most?
Dean, as I look at customers I've worked with, I see no time for discovery. They built it, but nobody validated it. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
let's see here. Dependency driven decisions and delays. That's a big one.
Yep.
Yeah, those are definitely the ones I see. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
influence anyone's vote, but
But don't worry. We're going to talk about all five of these
yeah.
today. All right. We're going to talk about all five of these. Yeah. Built the
Okay,
thing.
let's
Nobody
see
validated it.
here.
How are we doing here with the votes? Yeah, I think we've got a few
We
more.
have most people. So let's give it about 5 more seconds here.
All
So
righty.
5, 4,
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, well, let's end the
All
polls here. Let's
right.
get the
Let's go
results
ahead
here.
and
All
end that
righty.
poll and share the results.
Now let me share the results here. Boom. All righty. And as we can see, no time allowed for real discovery. We're going to talk about that. Design devolves into endless feature fights. Yes. Uh, Building the thing nobody validated. As I like to say, build the right thing. And before you talk about building it right. And then we have in a close second dependency driven decisions here, the what you talked about there. And then we have the go to market being run over by the release train. So we're going to talk about all these topics here. Let me just go ahead and move this off screen. And we're going to talk
All
about,
right.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Introduce the agenda. And I got a question for you I want to put up
All
after
right.
you talk about
All right.
this.
So we are going to talk about how to deal with these issues of discovery, design, development, deployment, and delivery. And then we're going to have some delicious deals at the end. For those of you who hang out to the end, Tom has got discounts for you. And then we're going to have some Q&A. So,
All right. So, Dean, our friend from Boston, if I
yeah.
not that I said that well, Guy, he has a question there. what are some early signs when a framework isn't working? How best to bring attention to the risk so it can be mitigated quickly? So I think
So,
some of that you're going to get to, but
yeah.
maybe some of that first one around some of those early signs.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually so guy, hang in there because I'm going to talk about the symptoms of the problem here. So you're about 3 slides away, and I'm not surprised that someone from Boston is thinking into the future. So hang in there. We're going to get through it just a second here. But I think first question I want to get to is one that's in the room here because Drew also has a question there. Like heavily regulated industries require heavy admin and overhead. So what if I can't change the current process? Let me put that question a second way here. And I'd be curious to get some comments. How can I respond at the speed of change despite my organization's current processes? Because really, that's what we're up against here. We have these large processes. As product managers and in many of our roles, we're not in a position to make these changes here. So, what can we do? So, today, I'm going to give you some guerrilla tactics so you can actually get these things done despite of not just despite, but because of heavy regulation, despite of the girth of the process, despite of the bloat of the bureaucracy. So I'm going to talk about these 5 different problem areas that we talked about in our poll. I'm going to go ahead and identify the symptoms so you know when you're up against it. But then I'm going to talk about approaches that you can do in your existing process to help get over that. So, question number 1: discovery theater, where you're pretending to explore the strategy. Okay. Now, here are the symptoms: there's no customer conversations, research is a luxury and usually gets cut, discovery tasks are skipped to hit our deadlines, backlogs are filled without understanding needs, and of course, our all time favorite, executives handing down half baked features. So, this is, some of the symptoms here that your framework is failing you because you're supposed to, in all these frameworks, do discovery. Yet, by the sheer enormity of these frameworks here, they actually get in the way of discovery. Meanwhile, experts in the industry are saying, look, you're not your customer. You have to talk to them. But I remember getting parachuted into this large enterprise company. Day one, I kid you not, I'm unpacking my bag as my first day of work. Tom, they walk up to say, oh, go to the 4th floor. We're installing safe. I can't believe, just the blood all drained out of me. And it was just like, oh no. And of course, sure enough, you say, just take this backlog. We don't have time for discovery here. We just need to get these features out. Meanwhile, Marty Kagan's thing is saying things like, discovery is about learning fast, not delivering fast. And of course, Ashmara gives us this famous quote: fall in love with the problem, not the solution here. So, what are some ways we can get around this? Believe it or not, the guys over at Google Ventures came up with a discovery path here. They call it a discovery track here. And then some of us have called this Sprint Zero, but whatever you call it, it's a 1 week exercise of outcomes and constraints where day one, you identify the problem. Day two, you sketch competing solutions. Day three, you pick the biggest opportunity. Day four, you build the prototype. And Tom, you and I had a conversation. What's day 5 on?
Friday.
Yeah, Friday. But what happens on day 5? We talk to real people, right? We talk
It's
to
test. Yeah. Well, I'm
yeah.
hoping on Monday you're doing some talking to real people
Yeah,
too.
Monday. Yeah, Monday. You're supposed to be talking to real people. In fact, if you want to learn how to do it, I just put a link in here. There's actually a book on the topic. All right, called Sprint. Oh, great, thanks there, Amazon. Yeah, it's called Sprint. How to solve big problems and test new ideas in just 5 days. So, oh yeah, Steve Johnson, our friend up in
Ooh,
Richmond
great.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey Steve. Only 20% of product managers have been trained, and half of them weren't trained in Scrum and Safe. And probably, yeah, I agree with you. So what's one way, whether we're doing safe, whether we're doing less, whether we're doing DAD, whether we're doing scale at Scrum or SAS or any of these other types of things, you should be able to run a discovery sprint or sprint zero to help walk through these steps. Why would you wait until day five? No, so Madeline, day one, you talk to the customer, and then on day five, you show the customer what you came up with based on the conversations. So thank you for raising that point because apparently I didn't make it clear enough. Day one, you talk to the humans, and then you work on things through the week, and on day five, you work with the humans. So thanks for that great point there, Madeline.
Yeah,
So
Dean, I got a
yeah,
couple of questions for you on this.
yeah,
So for sprint zero,
yeah.
one is how often should you do this? So what's the guideline? Is this
All right.
if I'm doing safe, should I do it before a PI and before each PI, or should I look at between certain iterations? And number two is
Yeah.
who from the team should be engaged in doing this?
So I like these questions here. And so I got two answers. And so first, I've seen one way is running this a couple weeks before the PI planning. All right. So that's one flavor of it. That's the flavor I prefer. But then I haven't done this myself, but I've seen it where the very first week or first 2 weeks, actually, they actually run two different discovery sprints to figure out what work they're actually going to work on there. Now, what happens is that then the PI planning is just sort of a guesstimate and it sort of
Hmm.
gets backfilled in. So you might have some purists there who don't like that. So you can run on either side. I think if you're running very formalized scaled agile framework, here's the trick, and here's the problem. And I'm glad you brought this up. Most of the time, we plan for 80% capacity, and what happens during the PI? What happens during the programming? Everything gets pushed up to 100% capacity, and you start cutting scope at the end, which means you're pushing too much crap into the PI. Because I wouldn't tell people I would scope at 60% capacity, get done, so I have a week before the PI to run this. So in other words, I would actually, or I would sit there and say, can we make the last week of the PI discovery? So again, there's a couple different ways you can insert this in here. This is about you have to have some human conversations. But again, you need to have these conversations. And yeah, how many product people have not talked to customers? This very large organization that had me there, and they said, "Hey, when I got to speak to customers," and they were like, "Oh no, the AEs, the account executives, don't want you talking to the customers." I kid you not. I heard that on day 4 after the training. And again, my heart, after the first week, I'm like, am I in the right place? So yeah.
I hear that on day two when we talk about voice of the customer.
Oh my gosh. And look, there's some big companies doing that. Salesforce uses Sprint Zero planning as well. So this is, we're not talking about something that's on the moon here. Alrighty, let's talk about problem number 2, design by committee, where everybody's opinion is a blocker. Alrighty, and this is like endless delays. Come on, Tom, there's got to be something here on the list that you find you know that resonates with you. For example, no one's what do you call it? Decisions are made with little or no data. Oh, that just drives me nuts every time that happens there. Or PMs, we become facilitators instead of decision makers. Uh,
You you know, the one that I see, which isn't actually directly related to this, is
yeah,
not that compliance signs off without seeing a proof of concept. It's
yeah.
that compliance doesn't even see it until about, a couple months before you plan to launch. And all of a sudden now they're raising all the issues up. So we didn't engage them up front as part of our upfront,
Oh
discovery
yeah.
work.
Yep, absolutely. Meanwhile, what do the experts say? Consensus is a recipe for inaction. Or this next one makes me, I would love to have been able to quote this one earlier in my life. Design by committee is a guarantee of mediocrity. And then finally, yeah, and Tom, you've seen this on my slides.
Yeah.
I find in every class I teach, I find one place to put this in. The most expensive way to test your idea is to build production quality software. All right. Absolute, most expensive way to do that. And so what can we do if we're working in a large framework, in a large, or, what I call waterfall in 2 week increments? Hey, we're doing Scrum. And of course, again, well, around 2017, this thought about dual track agile came about. It's one team with two cadences. Okay. One team, two cadences. Now think about this. Well, how does that happen? Well, first of all, if you're not, as a product manager or product owner, if you are not engaged in a product trio, that's you, someone who's someone with a great deal of maturity or experience from engineering, and someone from design or representing the customer interests, and then possibly maybe take that trio and turn it into quartet because you might want someone from data science in there, and have weekly conversations. When I was at IQVIA, I had a quartet. It was me, a lead engineer, someone from design who was in touch with the customers, and then someone from data science who was very in touch with the data and the process here. We would meet on Monday, even though we, and from on Monday we would have a conversation on what experiments are we going to run to help validate the ideas we're going to put into the backlog 3 sprints down the road. So while the current team, the dev team, was working on sprint 2, the quartet or the trio was thinking, what 1 week experiment can I run? What, and that word that TAD, that's tiny active discovery. What tiny active discovery can we run in 1 or 2 days that helps us validate that? We had a big argument over screen design. We wound up presenting 4 different screen designs to 30 different human beings, potential customers and customers. And sure enough, they picked the simplest one that none of the people in our organization designed. It met their needs and not ours. And so imagine the waste we would have had we not in sprint, while they were running sprint 2, had we not thought about sprint 5 and run some tiny acts of discovery. And I'm talking about rapid tiny acts of discovery where an 80% or 75% signal is enough to make a decision. You're not looking for perfection. I had a brilliant woman working with data science, and she was like, Dean, I can give you about 80% certainty for looking at the validity of the data in 2 days. But if you could give me 2 weeks, I can go ahead and what do you call it? Give you 100%. And I just told her, it's like, listen, first of all, your 80% is that everybody else. When you say 80%, everybody else says 120%. So, she was just that smart. But the other thing was, it's just like, look, we don't have time for that sort of perfection here. And that never failed us there. So we used dual track agile. So it was one team. And sometimes we had like one engineer give some of their bandwidth to this. So again, think about this. You can still run this in the course of whether you're in SAFe, less, DAD, whatever you're running here. And Spotify, who no longer uses the Spotify model, in fact, argues there's no such thing as the Spotify model, does practice dual track agile.
Dean, I'll go back. Drew earlier in the
Yeah.
conversation said, "Is the real problem here that product management is too tightly coupled to delivery?" And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And then Steve, of course, Steve Johnson added in there, only 20% of the product managers are actually trained in product. Well, he said trained, of
Yeah.
half of that is around Scrum. Okay,
Yep.
so you got a small percentage of the population actually trained in product management.
Yep.
So how does somebody take this back to an organization and say, how give me some time to do that? I can
Well,
kind
yeah.
of see the sprint 0 fitting in, but
Yeah.
trying to pull some bandwidth around this.
Yeah. I was going to save this remark to later, but I think it's the right time for this. So, for example, if you're a product leader right now, if you're a director of product or a VP, or if you're a product manager with a team, the way you pitch this is saying, look, we're going to try this with one team. Now, you make sure it's the team has their act together already and can pull this off. But we're going to show you this. So we're not going to sit there and tell you to do it organization wide because you'll never get that buy-in. What you can do is say, look, we want to experiment with this, then come back to you with the results. And then we can decide whether we want to add 2 or 3 more teams. And then if it works for 2 or 3 more teams, then we can roll it out to 10, and then we can roll it out to the rest of the organization. So what you want to do is think about is a progressive rollout. Just the same way you might do a progressive rollout with an application here, is do a progressive rollout with these type of programs here. Otherwise, you're not going to get the buy-in, the sponsorship, and then if something breaks, your blast radius is too big, and you'll never be able to experiment again. So, my rule about testing, no matter what you're testing, and this is including new ways of working, is keep the test tiny, so the blast radius is tiny, and the learning doesn't get colluded by causality because your signals become very strong when you're testing very tiny. So keep that in mind. Now, you talked about delivery, but let's talk about the development part first, and then we'll get to delivery. Let's talk about where shipping is success, even when it isn't. You and I have worked with more than one customer where we've said, "Hey, how are you defining success?" And what did they tell you that their definition of success was, Tom?
We delivered the features on schedule.
I had one giving me counts of features like they were body counts. I mean, it was just like I was like, no. I said, well, we aimed for 100 features and we delivered 110. And it was like, and so the roadmaps were not roadmaps; they were release plans. Okay, the engineers, some of the smartest people in the room, closest to the problem, were treated like what do you call it? Just code machines. Velocity was the metric of the day and celebrated. Big batch work was thrown into these backlogs of the teams. So what I call throwing lobbing a big huge epic over into a team. And then again, there's no room for rethinking our scope. Meanwhile, experts are saying if you only quantify one thing, you should be quantifying the cost of delay. Clay Christensen, who wrote, most companies allocate resource initiatives that show short-term returns, but not long-term growth. And then I love this Deming quote here, a bad system will beat a good person every time. So if we keep optimizing on shipping, if the only thing is getting crap out the door, then all we're going to do is get crap out the door faster. But at the end of the day, it's still crap. Or for example, was that famous book there on what do you call it, Scrum? Twice the what do you call it, twice the features and half the time, and which I created a parody book, twice the crap and half the time. At the end of the day, it's still crap. Or now 10 times because it's AI enhanced crap delivery. So so again, I mean, so one of the so a few years back, the people at Basecamp
Dean,
gifted.
sorry, want to go
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
this developing in the dark, and
yeah,
there was a conversation I had recently, and it had to do with along this line of where the product managers were so focused on just keeping the development team busy.
yeah.
And I think that's one of the rest of it is we're just we're doing stuff in the dark only because we
Right.
have resources available and we need to make them build something.
Well, think about this. Marty Kagan talked and got a big brouhaha last year when his book Transform came out, and he called this what he called agile theater or product management theater, where people are just basically backlog babysitters.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So how do we get out of that? Right? How do we get away from the value around velocity and said value about solving people's problems here? Well, what you can do, even running Scrum or Kanban in a process like Less or Safe or Scale at Scrum, you can incorporate ideas from a process known as Shape Up, and this comes from the folks at 37 Signals. And basically, what you do is you break your work into 6-week increments. But Dean, our PIs are 12 weeks. Perfect. Cut it into 2 6 weeks deliveries. But then here's what I need people to stop doing. Stop treating their backlog epics like a junk drawer or the attic, where it's just a collection of crap tickets that are vaguely related here. And all you're using it as a bag to vaguely characterize. Make your epics strategic. Define them in a way where they start with a hypothesis, they include tests that you're going to run, and metrics you're going to capture. And the goal of these half increments then are to sit there and validate a singular idea, this singular value metric. And so now you're betting on value. Now, what you want to do is when you're trying to define the narrowness of the scope, It's on how much appetite the customer has for what you're delivering versus how many features can we get out in this time frame here. Now you're shaping your shipments here, these barges here around value metric based epics. And so then you're able to sit there and fight off scope creep here.
Hmm.
And you can see here, look, you can, for example, one of the methods we use there that I use in a situation like that is where we did 6 week increments, and I created these strategic epics because we worked in 2 week sprints, and basically a small epic was one that got done, that in the sprint there, and then a medium epic was what do you call it, 4 weeks, and a large epic. So I put these constraints into the system. I intentionally used time as a constraint so we could identify what was the most valuable thing to work on, as opposed to how much crap can we get out the door in this time frame here.
Dean, and that is, that titling that back to value, or what we call product outcomes in our training class, is so valuable because what people try to do is they try to either deliver the whole vision of a feature that they ever had, which ends up, you know, expanding scope and not getting done in time, versus saying what absolutely is going to deliver against this metric. And just like you were talking about earlier, so much of product management falls back to the Pareto principle of which 20% is going to achieve 80% of that value.
Right. And again, what we're trying to do is put ourselves in a position of pivot, punt, or pursue. Do we continue to pursue this idea? Do we need to pivot? Or do we just need to punt? So again, just some thoughts there. I think Drew put something in here.
Yeah, yeah. He had a comment around, realistically, is 1 week really enough to do one of these discovery sprints? And I would say,
Right.
in an ideal world, no. But if I get at least something done, that kind of falls back to our Pareto principle. If I get
Yeah.
something done, I'm better ahead, right?
Right. And let's keep in mind what we're trying to do here, right? With this, we're trying to align the teams, not generate a full strategy. So in other words, it's just the end of the beginning here. We're trying to use this 1 week to get alignment, to clarify our direction before deeper work begins, as a primer, not a replacement to validation. Of course, you're going to have validations later, but when to get started in the right direction, a design sprint can be very valuable in creating that inertia in moving in the right direction, because we all know what happens, the inertia, when you start moving in the wrong direction here. And again, that can be also run. You could do like a half sprint here and run that. So just keep that in mind here. Let me see. I think I want to put, oh yeah, I've been gifting people here in the chats with different reading resources. So there's the resource for Basecamp, the Shape Up, if you want to try exploring that. Deployment disasters. Tom, you ever have to work nights or weekends when a bad release went out the door?
Oh, I fortunately never had to do that, but I heard some really good, or I say good, bad horror stories about doing that. And wasn't there
Yeah.
a company just recently that, in the security
Crowd,
area that had,
something. Yeah, just some sort of crowd or strike type system. Yeah, I'm not so sure
yeah.
what company it was, but yeah, I think you're right there. And again, and where every code merge is a roll that this wasn't even a code merge. This was I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't have this plan here, but this story's great. So CrowdStrike, they were actually creating these metadata files and then pushing them out to the application. So they did not run these through their automated testing regime. So basically, just circumvented it. And as some people know, a lot of systems went blue screen of death on us. So much so that I hear that Microsoft is getting rid of the blue screen of death. They want to. They're tired of that term. But yeah, late nights firefighting here, dependencies that modulate our releases, infrastructure bugs. Oh yeah, no monitoring and no learning here. Meanwhile, we have experts that tell us that shipping is not the end of the road. It's where the real work begins, especially for those of us in product management. Yes, the engineers say, well, I merged the code, we're done. Yeah, that's only the end of the beginning. High performers deploy more frequently with less drama. a shift. And this is one thing I really dislike about SAFE and other types of large bureaucracies is this whole release train and shipping here, where large successful enterprises are actually shipping many, many tiny features a day here. Yes, release is not delivery. We're going to get into release versus delivery here. We're still just talking about release. So Steve, hang in there. We got another slide there on release. So hang tight. So yeah, you can see where his head's in the right place here. All right. Instrumentation is not a nice to have. And this, Tom, how many organizations have you walked into and asked about their analytics instrumentation and you get crickets?
Oh, most of them.
Most of them, all right. So, and it explains a lot of problems here. So let's get into this. So you need to make friends in DevOps. I'm not going to sit there and get into too much of this. Others say you need to start understanding how some things work in the world of DevOps here. If you don't know about blue-green releases, canary releases, you go dark launches here, then you're not really understanding how to deliver systems safely in a compliant fashion here. And if you're not if you're not, what do you call it, delivering it safely, you're not really being agile here. Uh, Using feature flags to decouple the discovery from the dependencies. So, or dark launches. Again, why we can't do it, these dependencies. Well, you can if you put feature toggling around it. You can if you use more, what would you call it? If you use strategic, use of dark launches here. You just need to figure out how to work with your people in DevOps to help you to help you give you some observability here. And so, for example, I talked about the blue-green release. We use this at Primo quite a bit, where we would have an environment that was pre-release and all the build would go in there. And then when we knew it was ready to go, we'd flip the switch. And that was just a very simple DevOps way of making sure we had releases that didn't blow up things like CrowdStrike. And then you have feature toggles. When we were experimenting, we would turn on a feature toggle on for only one or two clients for 5 or 6 roles. So even though each client had 3,000 persons each, and we had like 80,000 people in the system, about 8 people got the feature that we were, and we had analytics to collect that. So you need to make friends in DevOps, right? You need to make some friends in DevOps there. Look, there's some more reading on that here, and I'll give that to you. But my bottom line is learn how to use it to help you with testing, as well as keeping compliance here and to get around some of the issues here. Um, Dead on delivery. So this gets into the whole thing with release here, where launching is equals winning, even though nothing has changed. So success is like, hey, we released, and we treat it as an event and not a go-to-market program. We treat the release not as a marketing part of our go-to-market and a strategy. We treat it as an event date, and that way no metrics are captured. Team velocity is again what's celebrated here. And then future strategic decisions are made lacking any evidence we capture, even though we're supposed to be focused on outcomes over outputs, even though we're supposed to be delivering with less waste, even though we're supposed to be delivering with data and not opinions. I think I saw that quote here earlier today.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
Steve
again,
put that up there.
yeah. So if you're a senior product manager, a principal product manager, a director, or even VP of product, I want you to take a step back and figure out what the heck are we measuring when this stuff goes out the door? Are you using evidence-based discovery? And what this is based off of evidence-based management. If you're not familiar with evidence-based management, it's been around for a little bit here. And basically, it's a shift away from status theater, and we're actually starting to look at things like, did we measure the customer value? Have we identified underserved needs? Have we shortened the path from idea to delivery? I think what Marty Kagan in his book Transform called that, instead of thinking that time to market, think about it as time to money. Have you shortened the time to money? Have you removed barriers to experimentation and change? This is why I'm talking to some of you who are directors and VPs. Have you removed barriers to experimentation here? So evidence-based management, you can bring that in if you're using SAFe, if you're using Scrum, they're doing Kanban, LESS, DAD, SAS, whatever, other acronyms in alphabet soup. And even large, financial companies like ING are using EBM to help measure success. So these are some, the five different, what do you call it, maladies and five different remedies here, because I want to answer this question here really quickly. Because one of the reasons why this has become more critical than ever is, what about the future here? What you're going to start seeing, whether you're working in SAFE or not, is people working in small bets. This is, and if you haven't become familiar with agentic AI, I would tell you to go watch our webinar from a couple months ago here, where you're going to start seeing people working in smaller, tinier units of function here, where generative AI can actually scaffold journey maps, OKRs, and narratives, not just one, but multiple. And in doing that, you can actually create tens and dozens of simulations. Well, Dean, I don't have any people. I don't have any customers yet. And you're starting to see a rise in synthetic data to help shape that. So, in other words, we are talking about Sprint Zero or the Discovery Sprint, which I call Discovery Sprint Zero or Sprint Zero Discovery to capture both names. Imagine day one where you're using synthetic data and now you're running more rapid. What do you call it? In one day, you can actually run several simulations of different answers here and then pick from the best. So in other words, rather than sit there and running one prototype, you could actually run thousands of prototypes and have the AI system there give you a recommendations of the best ones at the end. So you're going to see a lot of these processes compressed. For those of you making your living, really proud of your backlogs here, you're going to start seeing that work getting torn away by the rise of agentic AI and generative AI. So even these large systems, you're going to start seeing a lot of them fall to the wayside, or a lot of the Byzantine processes they have right now are going to get usurped by these smaller, faster, leaner ways of thinking. And Tom, I don't know how many people you've been talking to in the C-suite, but I've been, I've heard from a few, and they're all getting down pressure from their board. How do we save using AI?
Hmm.
All right.
Yep.
So yeah,
And I
that
definitely hear
train
that
is
from
coming.
product managers from their leadership.
Yep.
And it goes back to a whole different conversation. But
Yeah, well, yeah. And so
anyways,
again, leaders, stop managing and start piloting instead. All right. Target outcomes, not outputs, and do it around value streams. Make it safe for your people to experiment. All right. The other thing here is, you know, prioritize by using constraints. Get more done by focusing on less. And then read the signals and not the status. So it means you're going to have to pay for some instrumentation here. It's the only way you're going to survive on this. But again, I want you to make sure as we start getting towards the end here is start thinking about, hey, the world around me is changing. Think about that Martech's law. Technology is going to only get faster and faster. It's going to start replacing some of our processes here. What can I start doing while I work in these large bureaucracies? What are some, things that I can do at least at my team level or my group level so I'm more resilient to these changes? And then when these things do have to have, changes in process, you're already practicing better practices to get value out the door. So, survey time, Tom. Starting
yep.
today. What what are you going to do differently? So from what you've heard, from what you've seen, from what you've complained about to your the guy sitting next to you. Ooh, getting some interesting answers here.
Ooh.
Interesting. Wow, I think the results are sort of leveling out here, and this is sort of interesting here.
All right. Apparently, a little bit ago, I thought I was sharing the webinar link to Agentic AI, and
Hmm. What'd you give him?
it just went to the host and
Oh,
panelists.
okay, that's all right. Well,
I forget that it defaults me over there versus everyone.
no
So
worries. All right,
nobody
let's
saw
end
any
the
of my other
poll.
comments.
It's all right. I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to
Yep.
share the
Yep. Go
poll,
ahead.
and let's see what the results are here. So we're going to have people working smaller, even inside a big frame. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, you can start doing that today. And I've left you links here on different things. Shift from slinging tickets to owning problems. Run one tiny act of discovery. Replace status updates with product signals. Then get as many votes on that as I'd like. Use AI to cut process, but not corners. Okay, so some good stuff there. So we're gonna have Q&A, but Tom, I think you got some offers to talk about because we
Yeah,
promised the
absolutely.
people who
So
hung in massive discounts.
we are going to have a time right at the end to answer a few questions. So think about those questions, post those in the Q&A panel. But while you are thinking through those, first of all, this amazing discount. So we have available right now this offer using this QR code to be able to do our live online version of optimal product management for 2,999, 29.99 or 29.99. So a great discount on that of almost $1,000. And also, if you are unable to take the time to do the live online, you could use this discount code for our self-study program, which is for this limited time is only $999. So significant discounts on that. We do have some live online courses coming up very soon in May. So please look at our calendar for those that are coming up.
But that's not all.
That's not all. Absolutely. Also, we just spent this past hour talking about some of the challenges in implementing agile practices. And so, if you would like to get a free consultation, call with us around agile practices and learn more about our agile product management training class, use this QR code and
Yeah,
reach out to
yeah.
us and
If
we
you want
will
training that's more than just how to, be a Jira slinging ticket monkey,
exactly,
talk to
yes.
us. Yeah, or call us when you need us to fix it.
Yeah, it goes back to what I think Steve Johnson said earlier is
Yeah,
linking the strategy to execution.
yeah, yeah.
We help you do that with this course, and we deliver
Mhm.
that as a private training class.
Yeah, yeah. All
All right.
righty.
And one
Training,
more
more
thing. So
training,
these are,
and more, and yet more discounts. Can you believe it?
yeah, these are some of our upcoming live online courses. And for the AI product management coming up here in just over 2 weeks on April the 28th, you can use this QR code to save $1,000 on that product, on that AI for product management. So use that code or enter Productside AI 1000. So we're looking forward to hopefully see some of you in our upcoming uh, courses. So,
I
Dean,
think
I
it's
think
time.
those are offers. Let's
Time to
Q and
stump the
A.
chump. Time to stump the chump and ask some questions here.
Yeah,
Do we
I'm
have any
not
open?
see I'm not seeing any questions posted in the Q and
All
A.
right. Well, if you look up the term Jira slinging ticket monkey and put my name there, you will find an article on that topic.
Yeah, that is a
Just
Deanism, as we call it,
yeah,
product
yep. That
side.
goes with my other menagerie there. Yeah. So who else has got some questions there? Because some of you are saying like, how do I do this? Because I'm never going to be able to change my boss's mind here. So some of the things we talked about. Don't try boiling the ocean. Keep things small. Keep your experiment small and focused. If you run it with one team, run it with a small. So how do I sell this to leadership? Yeah. So again, pick the right project, shape it by the size of the appetite. So use some of the things we learned from Shape Up. And in doing that, you want to say we're going to run this with one team for the next, PI. And they're basically going to work in two 6 week increments here. We're going to put in instrumentation. We're going to seek value delivery over feature count and see what sort of results that team gets. And then use what you've learned to be able to sit there and say, okay, we've tried it, we've piloted this, we've run our proof of life, and we see that it's viable with the following changes here. So again, keep it small, socialize it small, and then what you'll be able to do then is sit there and get some buy-in for that.
Yeah.
Who else has
And,
got
and when
questions?
you talk about the right project, it also has to be the right team. So you have to have
Yeah.
the
Oh
team
my
that
goodness. Yes.
culturally wants to be able to try something new like that. Kelsey put a
Yeah,
question. How do I sell this to my development team? As I would be asking them to work a bit different cadence as well.
right. And here's some of those links I gave you all at once here. So I think part of this is I would try to sit there, see who the engineering lead is on that one team you want to start with, and talk about, look, treat them as you would a customer and saying, look, I feel like your needs are being underserved as an engineering team stuff. I've been looking at some of these methods here. What do you think we could do over the next so many weeks that we could improve our way of working here? For example, I think anyone who talks about dual track or shape up with their engineering team possibly going to get some good buy-in. I've never seen an engineering team push back on the Sprint Zero. They've usually been. In fact, what I found is more people they want to keep doing that because it's a lot of fun here. I think some of the DevOps things, you'd be surprised. Those people in DevOps can be pretty friendly. Don't be afraid; they're not going to bite. And like I said, I think for you, the hardest part is again getting your leaders to start thinking differently here. What what is that metric for success now? As is it going to be features out the door? Keeping people happy. What do you call it? What I call wolf prioritization works on latest fire. Is it the hippo? What do you call it? Hippo backlog where the highest paid person's opinion dictates that? Or are we going to build this around value? So some of that is also finding not just that engineering advocate and partner, finding that executive sponsor as well. And so again, you're going to have to socialize this and you are going to have to negotiate a little bit political in the organization to get the buy-in here.
Yeah. Hey, Kelsey put a comment in there.
Yeah.
We started a Sprint Zero this year and really like it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of, I've never heard, like I said, I think these are all good experiences there. So, oh, good. There's the link to Jira slinging. Yeah. Yeah. The product menagerie there. Um, so yeah, I think, like I said, just small. When you run your experiments, tiny is the key. Tiny and folk, don't try to test three. If you're going to test three things at once, test them individually in tiny increments. So the blast radius is small and the learning signals are very strong over the noise. So again, small and tiny are the keys of the day. Work incrementally, and you should be able to get the buy-in. I was able to bring these systems in to some what we call framework type of places, and we were able to sit there and create real value for our customer while creating a better way of working for the team.
All right. Well, we are coming up right at the end of the show here.
We are at
So,
the end of the show here.
yeah.
So again, you can reach out to Tom and I on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us here on at Productside, or reach out to us directly here. And don't be a stranger. And we'll see you at our next webinar.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you again.
All right,
All
everyone.
right.